Well, new data is now emerging about how the movement of people into and out of Nigeria is affecting migration patterns on the rest of our continent. The research says Nigeria has seen a big increase in the number of Nigerians leaving the country, but also seen a significant increase in the number of people moving into the country. Victor Amadi is a research fellow at the New South Institute and a research fellow at the University of Cape Town. He's written a report about this. Victor, good afternoon to you. What kind of patterns have we seen with the movement of people into and out of Nigeria in the last few years?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. And good afternoon to your viewers. So regarding your question about the patterns of migration in Nigeria, so Nigeria has also witnessed like a relatively small number of immigrants, particularly from individuals within the sub-region. So as it stands, Nigeria has seen about 1.3 million immigrants into the country as at 2020, based on the UN data tables. And this is based on an extensive report that was conducted by one of the research fellows who is part of this project. And also, Nigeria has seen a high level of immigrants actually moving also from Nigeria to other countries within the sub-region, and that figure stands at about 1.6 million immigrants.
Are we seeing the patterns changing? Are we seeing more people leaving, more people coming in?
So relatively, the number is somewhat low in terms of people coming in, but recently I think there is now a growing trend of immigrants. And this is just considering a host of factors, largely, looking at the unemployment situation in Nigeria, and also issues around security and the economic situation of the country. So there is conversations around youth immigration, or this concept of, a Japa syndrome, which is run or flee from Nigeria. So that is the recent trend and conversations around migration as it relates to Nigeria.
I imagine this affects, the movement of people across the continent. Nigeria is a big country, and so, there are a lot of people there, and people move around. If they leave Nigeria, most of them probably stay in Africa. In other words, it pushes people around our country. In other words, it pushes people around the region. It has a big impact on what's happening across the continent.
Yeah, relatively, I think the movement, particularly for Nigerians, happen within the sub-region. So most Nigerians tend to go to countries like Benin Republic or Ghana or the Ivory Coast. So there's a concentration of movement, particularly within the West African sub-region. And this is, I think, considering the framework that has been built around the economic community of the West African states, and also looking at the history of the sub-region and how migration occurred even during colonization. And in terms of outward migration or people leaving Nigeria, I think the tendency is, they tend to move towards Western countries more, in search of better opportunities or better education. So that is one of my findings.
And managing the movement of people, are governments finding that difficult to do? I mean, around the world, governments find that difficult to do, but I imagine the Nigerian government and the countries around Nigeria, it's exactly the same.
Yes, relatively, I think Nigeria has fairly managed in managing migration. I think particularly the issue that has actually plagued Nigeria is that of irregular migration, people actually seeking to leave the country through irregular channels. But, with sensitization around the dangers of irregular migration, so much of the policies that actually speak to migration are channeled towards ensuring, migrants get to move through formal channels. And those who are coming in find it much easier to actually gain access to the Nigerian market.
It's interesting because, I mean, we see big debates in Africa about how to manage migration. We're supposed to be having a situation, in fact, with fewer borders, making it easier for people to move between countries. I don't know if that's really happening. I mean, I think it happens in some parts of Africa. It may happen in East Africa. In Southern Africa,
Right.
as I'm sure you've seen, there are huge, intense debates about it.
Right, rightfully so. So within the Nigerian context, it's broadly looking at how the region has shaped as a whole. So Nigeria was a key player in the formation of the Economic Community of West African States, for instance, and it really brought into the ideas of what integration should actually look like, which fundamentally speaks to the free movement of people amidst other objectives. So Nigeria, relatively as part of ECOWAS, right from the 70s, has actually pushed this idea, towards facilitating migration across the sub-region. Similar within the East African community, so the engagement has really been somewhat open or liberal towards movement, not so much within Southern Africa, but I think what really informs that, likely comes from the history of the sub-region, and also, within Nigerians' own context, actually, looking at the major wins when it comes to actually allowing people to move freely. So as a receiving country of migrants, there are relative benefits. As a sending country as well, there are also some benefits to affording free movement.
In our country, as I'm sure you've seen, particularly during the election, we see more and more political parties taking a sort of xenophobic line or talking about foreign nationals for various reasons. Is that happening in other countries, or is there more xenophobia here than in other places? And again, the richer the country, the more sort of xenophobia you see in a way. And I mean, the prime example of that is the United States.
Right. So relatively, I think Nigeria, migration is not really a politicized issue. The conversations generally, I think, are coming from a more developmental kind of perspective. So it speaks to actually utilizing the benefits of migration. Case in point, Nigeria receives quite a lot of remittances from Nigerians in diaspora. And actually keen into that, Nigeria has developed a migration policy relating to diaspora. So this is actually looking at how to channel ways in which to facilitate return migration and also get them to, utilize their skills, in respective sectors in the country. So I think Nigeria is more open and more development oriented in their thinking towards migration. So it's not so much of a politicized issue compared to some countries globally.
Victor Amadi, thank you. A research fellow at the New South Institute and a research fellow at UCT, the author of that report. Do appreciate the time.